Chaos and violence in Venezuela. The opposition leader calls for a military uprising, but President Maduro says he's quashed an attempted coup. I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is Juan Guaido and his supporters. It was a dramatic 24 hours in Venezuela that began with the release of a video. In a short clip filmed on a mobile phone, opposition leader Juan Guaido announced he was in the final phase of ending Nicolas Maduro's presidency. Surrounded by men in military uniforms, Guaido urged his supporters to take to the streets and oust the socialist president. Thousands did, and violent confrontations ensued. But despite the protests, Maduro remained defiant. In a live address to the nation, he promised to be victorious and pledged he'd punish those responsible for the attempted coup. Now his rival has called for more action, and it looks like this stage is set once again for a showdown. Melinda Nucifora has more.
Violence on the streets of Caracas. Venezuela's political tug-of-war has escalated. One side is calling this Operation Freedom. The other says it's an attempted coup. Flanked by military chiefs, President Nicolas Maduro gave a televised address saying he remains in control.
Nunca jamás estuvo tomada la base militar de la Carlota, como todas las bases militares estuvieron en alerta total, leales absolutamente a la revolución y al comandante en jefe y a nuestra Constitución.
While on social media, opposition leader Juan Guaido reasserted that he's the acting president and legitimate commander of the armed forces.
Tuvimos claro que lo que decía el régimen, que tenía el control de las Fuerzas Armadas, es una farsa. Sabemos que Maduro no tiene el respaldo ni el respeto de las Fuerzas Armadas, mucho menos del pueblo de Venezuela, porque no protege a nadie, porque no ofrece resultados, porque no ofrece soluciones.
It started early on Tuesday when Guaido urged his supporters to rally in the streets. He said his plan to oust Maduro was a non-violent struggle within the framework of the Constitution. But as the crowds grew, the protests turned violent. Police and military responded, first with tear gas, then live bullets.
Guaido is my legitimate president from here on out. Whatever happens, I'm going to follow him to death.
To his followers, Guaido is a symbol of hope and progress. The country's economy has been in steep decline since 2014. Hyperinflation has made it worse, widespread power cuts are common, and a shortage of food, water and medicine is taking its toll.
We need to bring an end to this regime. It's useless. 20 years on, going on 21 years, we're hungry.
Maduro won re-election in December, but many independent observers say the vote was rigged. Guaido was appointed as the head of the National Assembly in January. He has the backing of about 50 countries, including the United States, most of Europe and the majority of Latin America. Maduro has the support of nations such as Russia, Turkey, Iran and China. The US government says Maduro was on the verge of fleeing to Cuba during Tuesday's uprising.
Yeah, it's understanding that he was ready to go. He'd made a decision that we've been urging him to make for quite some time, and then he was diverted from that action by the Russians.
It's an accusation Maduro denies.
Dios mío, ¿hasta dónde van a llegar ustedes, señores del gobierno de Estados Unidos?
Guaido has urged his supporters to keep up the pressure. But if that political push is again met with military might, there's a risk Operation Freedom could be fatal. Melinda Nucifora, The Newsmakers.
Well, to get the view from the ground, let's go to Caracas, where I'm joined by Emiliana Duarte. She's a journalist and co-founder of Caracas Chronicles, an independent news and analysis organization. Emiliana, good to have you on the Newsmakers. Could you tell us what it's like on the streets right now?
Well, Well, this morning, Venezuela woke up to a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos after what has been a very chaotic 24 hours ever since yesterday at dawn. Interim President Juan Guaido sent a message out through social media, through a video, flanked by what looked like around 30 or so military officers from the National Guard, calling once again on the people to join him in his path to get Nicolas Maduro to seize the usurpation of the office, is what he refers to, obeying his interpretation of the Constitution that Nicolas Maduro is holding the office illegitimately.
He called the people to join him. Is it clear how many people joined him?
It looked like tens of thousands. The call for people to go on the street and support these dissident military personnel, and also it's important to note dissident political police officers, probably the highest ranking defection to date. This was a surprise impromptu call. Venezuela is notorious for having very censored media, and information is difficult to access. But regardless, ever since that video was released in the morning, by noon, there have been tens of thousands of people in Caracas, where I was at. And I've confirmed that protest also happened in around 20 states all throughout Venezuela.
Okay, Nicolas Maduro says he has foiled the plot or the move. Is that correct?
Well, there were battling messages, because Juan Guaido also released a video broadcast last night saying that the military throughout Venezuela has joined the cause of restoring democracy, and Maduro claims otherwise. Of course, Maduro went live through all television and radio stations last night, surrounded by some cabinet members and members of the high military command. Like I said, it's a very confusing moment, because different versions are claiming different outcomes. And I imagine that things are still very fluid, and we have yet to see what the denouement of today's events are. Another giant demonstration has been called for by Guaido last night, and we're still waiting to see what the turnout is going to be like.
Right. And in many ways, this is a question of who has more legitimacy. Maduro says, I am the elected president. Guaido says, no, you're not. I am the elected president. Is there any way to verify it, whether it's by counting the amount of people who go to the streets, or is there any way to actually poll the people of Venezuela to find out who they support?
Well, the reason that ever since Juan Guaido took the oath of office as interim president on January 23rd, he laid out 3 steps that were necessary to restore constitutional order in Venezuela. Like I said, because the claim that Maduro was elected last year through a sham election has been heavily questioned, not just by Guaido supporters, but also over 50 countries that do not recognize Nicolas Maduro as the legitimate president. Every time there is a call for people to go out on the streets and support Guaido and his quest to restore democracy, the underlying premise has been to get the military to break. And that's why every event, every call to action ever since January 23rd has been aimed at that objective. The humanitarian aid airlift that occurred in February sought to have the military symbolically switch sides. And amnesty laws have been also approved by the opposition National Assembly as an incentive to get the high-ranking military officers to switch sides. And at this point, the question of legitimacy remains. But if it's just a matter of counting the number of people on the street, I think it's pretty evident that turnout always ends up being larger when it comes to Guaido. The second step that Guaido mentioned after seizing the usurpation of office is to convene a transitional government, so that the third step can take place, which is for free and fair elections to be called as soon as possible. But it is Guaido's thesis that free and fair elections can only happen once Maduro cedes power, since he controls all institutions, and every election that has happened in the past couple of years has been called heavily into question.
Emiliana Duarte, thanks for joining us here on the Newsmakers from Caracas. Let's broaden out this discussion and bring in 3 new guests. In Caracas is Paul Dobson, a journalist at Venezuela Analysis. In Washington, D.C. is former Congressman Gustavo Coronel. He was also a founding board member of the Venezuelan state-owned oil company Petróleos de Venezuela. And also joining us is political strategist Jose Aristimuño, who's working closely with Juan Guaido's team. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Paul, did Emiliana accurately describe the situation on the ground in Caracas?
Yes, to some extent, I would agree with her description of the events of yesterday. Yesterday was undoubtedly an attempted coup d'etat by Juan Guaido and his team. It was a failed coup d'etat. We can only count around 15 soldiers who heeded his call to rebel against the chain of command and against the elected president of Nicolas Maduro. His main ally quickly ran into hiding and is currently in the Spanish embassy seeking asylum. So I think Juan Guaido very much defeated yesterday in his political objectives. The government seemed very calm in their response to the activities of yesterday. President Maduro addressed the nation at 9 o'clock in the evening. He felt no need to do so beforehand. There was no sense of panic in his words. And the high military command also issued a number of statements throughout the day, very calmly reinforcing the fact that there was no real threat to the constitutional order yesterday, despite the attempt by Juan Guaido to do so.
Gustavo Coronel, is Operation Freedom dead? Has it failed?
Operation Freedom certainly is very much alive. This is a process. This is not a one-time thing. And as you know, the legitimate government of Juan Guaido has been in action for 3 months or so. So what happened last night is one point in the curve. Today, Venezuelans are in the streets. The government of Mr. Maduro, or rather the regime of Maduro, is extremely weak. And the outcome is inevitable. Maduro is going to be out of power very soon. You cannot call this a coup d'etat simply because the legitimate government of Guaido is the one trying to displace this gang of gangsters who have taken the Venezuelan people hostage. What we have in the Maduro government is really a combination of very high corruption, high inefficiency, and cruelty. The way they are subjecting the Venezuelan people to all kinds of humiliations and privations. This is very well known all over the world now.
Okay. Let me bring in Jose. Jose, if the army really was behind Guaido, wouldn't Maduro be dead, in jail, or in exile by now?
I gotta agree. First and foremost, let's be very clear. I mean, the Maduro regime has been in power for over 5-10 years. If you include Hugo Chavez, you're talking about over 20 years that they have been in power. This takes time. Guaido has been in power for a little bit over 4 months now, so it's going to take time. The solution doesn't come overnight. I don't think Operation Freedom has failed at all. I think we're getting very, very close. In regards to your question about the military, each and every day, more and more militaries are coming and supporting Guaido because they understand he's the president. They understand that a majority of the international community, over 50 countries across the world, support President Guaido. There's no way that Maduro can remain in power. He's being caught economically, financially. We're bringing in humanitarian aid thanks to President Guaido. It's going to take time, and let's be very clear. Let's be very clear that there are rumors that Maduro was getting ready to leave to Cuba yesterday, and the Russians stopped him, and that could potentially be very true.
Right. Right. The Russians say that's information war.
The Venezuelan people are going to be out on the street.
Right. Pompeo mentioned that the Russians say this is part of the information war at the moment and that it's not true. Let me ask you very directly, because you work with Guaido's team, you're sitting in D.C., we see an image of the Capitol behind you. The claim from Maduro, the claim from his foreign minister, is that this was a coup d'etat attempt orchestrated by Washington, that is not even being orchestrated by Guaido. So are you currently sitting in D.C. working with the Americans to overthrow Maduro's government?
Well, first and foremost, we're not going to overthrow any government because Maduro doesn't have a government. It's an illegitimate government. They shouldn't be there. And I will say this and be very clear. This was not a coup d'etat. This is not a coup d'etat because we're not overthrowing a government. The government belongs to the people of Venezuela and it belongs to Guaido. If we go back to 2018, Maduro called illegal elections. He called illegal elections in May of last year. They were not real, which is why this year, when he tried to claim himself as president, it was illegitimate. And the Constitution of Venezuela backs this up. This is not a coup d'etat. The international community understands this.
Let's go away from the terminology. Let's go away from the terminology. Are you working with the Americans? Do you have meetings with Americans, whether at the White House? Okay. Do you have meetings with State Department, White House, I don't know, Congressman, DOD, I don't know. Do you have meetings with them talking about bringing Guaido to power with American help, money, influence? Yes or no, sir?
I'm not going to speak publicly of what is happening in meetings. And if we have learned one thing, is that when you say too much, things don't work. This is why yesterday, no one knew what was happening tomorrow. Yesterday, in the very early mornings, Juan Guaido with Leopoldo Lopez released by the military that supposedly were Maduro supporters. They weren't, because they're in the right side of history. We are very, very close of taking our country back. I'm not going to speak public of what type of meetings
but we'll take it as,
and what type of meetings we're not having.
We'll
but
take it as
what I can tell you is we are very, very close.
We'll take it as...
Is it possible? Is it...
Okay, come in.
I was going to say that we are not in a tribunal here. I am a Venezuelan who has no connection whatsoever with the State Department or the Donald Trump government, but I speak for the people of Venezuela because 90% plus of the Venezuelan people are with Juan Guaido by all independent polls. All the indices of the Venezuelan people at this moment are in the lowest positions of international rankings. We are almost last in competitiveness. We are last in corruption. We are last in the misery index published has Venezuela as the most miserable regime in the world. So fortunately, all the evidence is for all the world to see.
And Mr. Coronel, yes, I hope you understand. It's my job to ask the question, right? The claim is from Maduro and his supporters that there's a coup d'etat being orchestrated from Washington. We have to address that.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead and ask the questions, because I could also ask you, for example, are you in Maduro's payroll after so many years of chanting the good things about Chavez first and now Maduro? I mean, I know that sometimes there are ideological fanatics, but some others, like there are others who are simply mercenaries.
Okay,
so that's also a legitimate question.
Okay, but for the record, I was not on Hugo Chavez's payroll, and I'm not on Nicolas Maduro's payroll. Let me go to Paul.
Well,
certainly.
I congratulate you because others were.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Paul Dobson. Paul, we just heard from Gustavo, we heard from Jose earlier on, and the point that they're making is that this is not even a question of legitimacy when it comes to Maduro anymore, because it's long gone. He lost his legitimacy. He wrecked the economy, he made a mess of the country, and this is just a process where there's an inevitability of Guaido coming to power, because that's what the people want. Paul, is that a reality in your eyes?
Well, just before I answer that question, I'd like to leave it clear that I'm also not on anyone's payroll, let alone Nicolas Maduro, and certainly not Donald Trump, like some of the opposition members in Venezuela have proven to be. If I were, I would be earning a lot more than I am. The inevitability of regime change is a political line spun in the media by principally the US, but also regional allies. It's put out there to try to convince those who are doubtful about the success of their regime change tactics and to try to bring them on board. Essentially, what we have to look at here, Imran, is how, if Venezuelans want change, what is the strategy to bring about this change? Is it through US bombing? Is it through a coup d'etat by somebody who was not elected to be president? He was elected to be a member of the National Assembly. or is the strategy to bring about a change in the political direction of the country through the ballot box? Is it a democratic way? And I think when people outside of Venezuela are looking at the situation, we have to put aside to some extent our personal opinion or evaluation of the performance of the current government, because this isn't necessarily an issue about whether we like Maduro or
Paul,
not.
they're saying that the last time this was put to a democratic test, Maduro rigged it. It was a sham. That's why they don't trust him in this democratic process. They feel that he had his chance.
My response to this is twofold. Firstly, the independent electoral observers, who are the technicians, declared the elections to be free and fair. And secondly, the opposition leaders, Juan Guaido, all of the rest of the parliamentary leaders, were elected using exactly the same electoral system which was used to elect Nicolas Maduro in May. So if the system was rigged, then they also have no legitimate authority in their roles in the National Assembly either.
Okay,
Okay,
so let me pop out of this for a second and talk geopolitics. Gustavo, I know you have a lot to say. I want to ask you about the geopolitics and the support on both sides, right? So yes, there are more than 50 countries that support Guaido and this movement. The United States, the Europeans, the Brazilians, the Colombians. On the other hand, there are countries who support Maduro. The Russians, as was mentioned, and there are all sorts of rumors that go along with that. The Chinese, Turkey showing its support for Maduro. We see that the fault lines geopolitically are being drawn at the moment. Do you believe that the people on your side are more useful right now in order to fulfill your goals?
Well, let's put it this way. Guaido's government is supported by, as you say, by the United States, Canada, the European Union, the Lima Group, which is the majority of the big countries in Latin America, and the rest of the democratic world, whereas the regime of Maduro is still supported by Cuba, by China and Russia, that have invested heavily in the Venezuelan of Chavez and Maduro. So whereas we are committed to a change for democracy in Venezuela, Russia and China and Cuba and Nicaragua are ideologically driven. I mean, there is no desire to install in Venezuela a truly democratic country from the side of the Russians and the Chinese. So on that basis, I am sure that trying to get a real democracy in Venezuela installed is on the right side of things. Right. I have no doubt about it.
Okay. So then, Jose, with that in mind, so we're seeing the different countries back their different candidates, if you like. The Mexicans are still saying, please, allow us to mediate. Allow us to come and find a bridge between the two and some common ground. Is that moment over? Are the Mexicans wasting their time by trying to find compromise?
Well, I think so, and this is why. I mean, part of it is we've tried to negotiate with Maduro and his regime for a very long time. Zapatero, former president of Spain, tried to get involved. The Pope tried to get involved. The Catholic Church certainly got to get involved, and we got nowhere. So I think the days of negotiation are over. What we're asking for is very simple. We want to take the country back. We want free elections. President Guaido has said it from the very beginning. He is the interim president. He is the president until we get free elections in Venezuela and we have a real democracy. Maduro has lost his chance. We've tried to work with him. He has failed. He's illegitimate. A majority of countries, this is not just me, this is not just Washington, this is pretty much a majority of countries in the world. They support President Guaido. We are going to continue to put economic sanctions on the Venezuelan dictatorship and Maduro. We're going to continue doing that through oil. We've taken the reins back of Citgo, of the board of directors. So there's a lot of oil in Venezuela, as you know. So the more you start to cut the money that comes from the oil supply in Venezuela, Maduro is going to have a very, very hard time maintaining power. He has been able to do it for the last 4 months, and I understand that. But this sort of things take time. He has no choice. I think we've been very clear. You have Maduro he can leave today. He can end this once and for all. He can leave today. He can go to Cuba. He can go to Russia. He can go to Turkey, China. We don't really care. You can leave today, Mr. Maduro. You can leave the country, and we'll have real free elections. He's had his chance and he's lost it.
Yeah, what a lot of people are fearing is that this will be a fight to the finish, and that could get very bloody and very ugly, and we hope it does not. But we will be watching the situation in Venezuela very, very closely.
That's right, and us the same. Us the same. Nobody wants bloodshed. Trust me, I'm with you on that. Nobody wants bloodshed in Venezuela. I hope we don't get to that. I hope we don't get to that. Maduro has an opportunity to evade that by leaving power.
Okay, well, gentlemen, we're out of time, but I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Paul Dobson, Jose Aristimuño, Gustavo Coronel, and earlier Emiliana Duarte. And just full disclosure, we had Eva Gollinger, who was a former advisor to Hugo Chavez, who had agreed to come on the program and then didn't want to be involved in the panel, unfortunately, because it would have been good to get her perspective. But be that as it may, thank you very much. Looking forward to talking to you all again sometime soon. Still to come, the UN calls Yemen humanity's greatest preventable disaster. We challenge one of the warring parties over allegations they're killing civilians and starving the population. The war in Yemen is one of the most brutal conflicts in the Middle East. Tens of thousands have been killed as a result of fighting between Houthi rebels and the Saudi-backed Yemeni government. And that death toll looks to be rising fast. A UN report warns the war is on track to have claimed around 250,000 lives by the end of the year. Both sides have been accused of abuses, with Human Rights Watch claiming the Houthis' widespread use of landmines has killed civilians and blocked aid from reaching those in need. In a moment, I'll speak to their foreign minister and ask what he makes of those allegations. But first, Haider Abbasi takes a look at who's fighting and why.
After 4 years of war, the Houthis of Yemen aren't giving up. The rebels have been fighting an alliance of 8 countries, led by Saudi Arabia.
In the coming year, we will use ballistics, rockets, and drones, just like we've used in the previous operations, which exhausted the enemy.
The conflict has devastated Yemen, the poorest Arab nation. But who are the Houthis, and what do they want? The Shia Muslim group comes from northern Yemen. In what seemed like a push for greater autonomy, they fought a series of rebellions against Yemen's former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Popular protest in 2011 forced Saleh to hand over power to his deputy, Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. But Hadi's control was fragile, and the Houthis took it as an opportunity. By early 2015, they had swept through the capital, Sana'a, and forced President Hadi into exile. The rise of the rebels seemed to alarm Yemen's neighbor, Saudi Arabia. The kingdom said the Houthis were backed by its rival, Iran. That year, Riyadh launched its first air campaign against the group. The Saudis say they wanted to restore the government of President Hadi, but the Houthis proved to be a stubborn enemy. Fighters loyal to Hadi control parts of the east and south. Al-Qaeda has a presence in the southwest, and the Houthis control most of the west. Other than Sana'a, the most important point of control is Hodeidah. That's the port on the Red Sea, where 70% of all goods come into the country, including the humanitarian aid most Yemenis need to survive. The UN says airstrikes from the Saudi-led coalition have caused most of the casualties in Yemen. The coalition has hit weddings, schools, and even funerals. But the Saudis aren't the only ones accused of attacking civilians.
We fled the war. The Houthis attacked us from one side and the coalition from the other. They hit us hard. We escaped by the skin of our teeth.
Human Rights Watch has accused the Houthis of leaving landmines around Hodeidah. The Houthis agreed to withdraw from Hodeidah as part of a truce struck with the coalition in December. But fighting continued and the rebels haven't left the port. The Houthis seem determined to keep up their fight against Saudi Arabia and its allies. But what's their endgame, and what can be done to break the stalemate? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Last week, I spoke to the foreign minister of the Houthis' self-proclaimed National Salvation Government in Yemen, but unfortunately, several technical issues forced us to cut the interview short. So we've invited Hisham Sharaf Abdallah back on the program to finish our conversation. He joins us once again from Sana'a. Good to have you on the program, sir. There were some memes on the internet suggesting that we deliberately cut you off because of political or editorial reasons. I just want you to confirm that, yes, there was a power cut on your end and that it was purely technical.
It was a mere technical reason due to electricity.
Okay, wonderful.
No one really interrupted the program, and I can confirm it to everyone of your spectators.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so let me finish the question that I was asking you. You claim to have long-range missiles that can hit the capitals of Gulf nations who are part of the coalition, and I asked you very directly, is Iran giving you those missiles?
No. I think people are using this Iran issue as a subject to attack Iran. We have nothing to do with Iran when we are defending ourselves. And as I said, we had a stock of weapons a long time ago. We updated some of it, and we are trying to defend ourselves because we are in a defensive position, not offensive position.
Okay, it's not just me asking this question, and it's not just random commentators making this claim. The US Secretary of State, Mr. Pompeo, said very recently that these are not Houthi indigenous weapons systems. They have been smuggled into Yemen from Iran. Your response to the US Secretary of State?
My response is that the Americans or the American administration wants to get Yemen as a card in this regional game of power. So they keep saying that Iran is supplying weapons to Yemen, while they know that we had that stock of weapons and we don't need Iran to smuggle them to us. And the whole thing is on Iran. They want to get Iran at the corner. They're using Yemen. The Americans know. We had a lot of long-range missiles. Some of them have been financed by the Saudis 10 years ago. So why they don't say the truth to the world? Because of one reason. They want to make some problems for Iran. For us, I deny again that Iran is smuggling anything to our country. And where are the American satellites? Let them show it to the world. Where are they? I mean, they are watching everything in the world, as they say, in their big satellite network. So again, Mr. Pompeo is completely wrong, and he is serving certain interests to attack the Iranian government or the Republic of Iran.
How much support do you get from the Iranians?
The Iranian government is a brotherly country, as much as Turkey, a Muslim country, and the support is mainly moral, and they are siding with us in certain issues. But if you talk about certain support, they are doing it secretly. I think someone has to uncover it to the world. As a national salvation government composed of Ansarullah, the Houthis, and the GPC, my party, we are not getting anything from Iran. And I wrote several letters requesting some support, and no one replied anything to me.
I want you to address the claims from Human Rights Watch again, where they say your mines have killed 140 civilians, including 19 children in Hodeidah and Taiz alone. They say your landmines are killing innocent civilians. Address that. Is Human Rights Watch wrong?
Yes, I can address it very clearly that it is part of the media campaign against the National Salvation Government and against those who are defending Yemen. There might be some casualties due to some military operations, and it happens. We are using all of our weapons to defend ourselves against the coalition, the Saudi coalition, and against their militias. So, again, If any incidents like that happened, we would like to know about it and investigate it and try to avoid it. But to say the National Salvation Government military or army is doing this and that and they are putting mines, we are not putting mines at places where people live. We are making them, or we are using them, and we have the right to use them to defend our troops. So again, Human Rights Watch have to write to us, tell us we will avoid such kind of casualties. We are not using our weapons to hit our citizens, to hit our people. We are trying to defend ourselves again, and Human Rights Watchers are welcome to come to me. They should write to me, come to Sana'a, and we will talk about that subject. And let's see then what will be the details, or what will be the reality behind what they are claiming against us.
Okay, so let me add to that, that near the end of last year, Human Rights Watch said that they have concrete proof that your government, your self-proclaimed government, has been torturing detainees. And it went on to say that there was a long list of abuses of detention, torture, and enforced disappearances. The World Food Programme says you're withholding aid from the people and you're preventing the World Food Programme from the UN from going to grain storage and and taking it to the people, right? And then Amnesty International calling on you recently to release 10 detained journalists. With all of this in mind, this is not a government, right? It's a militia trying to run a country. You guys are playing dress up. You're not acting like a government, you're acting like a militia.
My response to this is really opposite to what you just mentioned. When all these things happened and the war started, it's true that Ansarullah, the Houthis, came to Sana'a. But then who stood up against the aggression? It is the Yemeni military who stood by Ansarullah, and together they are fighting the Saudis. That's on the military side. Then we, the former system or the former officials who used to be in the government, joined the Ansarullah, the Houthis, in a coalition government. So it's not a militia government. I deny that this is a militia government, and you can ask anyone who is visiting Sana'a with whom you are meeting. We are meeting with the system, with the state, the Republic of Yemen government.
Okay, but
this is the government, which is the coalition.
And I apologize for interrupting
between
you. Certainly.
the Houthis and the GBC.
They're meeting with you, and everybody's wearing suits and ties, and you're sitting in the official buildings of the former government. But that doesn't address the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that the human rights groups are saying you're torturing civilians, you're imprisoning and torturing journalists, you're withholding food from the World Food Programme, and your landmines are killing civilians. So what I'm saying is, yes, you can claim to be the legitimate government, and people can come and meet with you because they have to, but the way you are governing is not like that of a government, but rather like that of a militia.
Yeah, but again, these allegations, I mean, okay, there might be some mistakes. I cannot deny it. But these allegations are part of a big media campaign financed by the aggression, by the Saudis and the Emiratis. These are the governments that are paying billions of dollars to show the world that Sana'a is a place of all bad things. If there are any claims against us considering torturing, let's talk about it and we will prevent it. If there are claims from the WFP, we have talked to them and we are allowing them to do their work. And if there are certain incidents, we can also correct it or clarify it. And when it comes to the other issues, those who are claiming things against the system in Sana'a should come forward to us and not talk from far away or financed by certain governments to picture us in the world that we are in the dark area. No, we are trying to get out of that dark area of war and go to peace. So help us to help the people of Yemen to come back to peaceful times. But to say, no, Sana'a is doing this, Sana'a is doing that. What about the Emiratis and the Saudis who are killing hundreds of people, torturing a lot of people, putting a lot of people in jail and buying soldiers with $100 per day? No one talks about it because
no, we
these
do.
are
We
big
do
states.
talk about it on this show.
But
yeah,
because we are defending.
No, but I mean, I'll tell you. You know, Yemen's
No one
former
talked
health
about it.
minister.
We
Listen,
didn't ask about it.
listen. I'll tell you something. Yemen's former health minister Najib Ghanim refuses to come onto this show anymore because he considers me pro-Houthi because I list the alleged crimes of the coalition, and we talk of the death toll from the airstrikes and so on. So believe me, we talk about it on the show, and now we have the opportunity to talk to you. This is why we're talking to you, and we're putting the allegations to you. Let's put that aside for a second. Earlier this week, your government asked the United Nations to arrange the sale of your crude oil and use the revenues to finance fuel imports and pay the public sector salaries, right? So first of all, it tells us that you're running out of money and you're asking the UN to sort of use the oil revenues for you. But they don't recognize you as a legitimate government. Why would they want to line your pockets?
Let me clarify to you what they mean by that. First, we have a big floating ship in Hodeidah, and this floating ship has about maybe 1.2 million barrels of crude oil. That floating ship might cause a big hazard to the Red Sea if it's hit or something like that. So, number one, we have talked to the UN several times. Take that quantity of oil and try to see who will buy it, and then use that money to finance some things for the population of Yemen, medications, food, and other stuff. So this is really the main thing. We don't mean the issue of the oil fields who are in Marib or in Hadramaut. We mean this floating ship called Safar. And this is our right. It's under our control in Hodeidah. And we don't want that floating ship with a huge quantity of oil to spill to the Red Sea, and then it will kill all the fish there or will cause a big environmental hazard. This is what we mean by the oil. Concerning the issue of recognizing us, we are recognized by our people, not by the world. The world deals with who has the money, who has the support from the UN and from the NATO. So again, we are now defending our people. We will come to the stage of being recognized coming soon, because we are caring for our population, not caring for the Saudis' interest in this part of the world. That's the reason why our people first are recognizing us. Then we will get the recognition of the world. We are not serving Saudis, not serving Americans, not serving Iranians. We are serving our people of Yemen, and this is what makes us strong in this country.
Are you complying with the agreements of Stockholm?
Yes, we do, and I can prove it to you. We asked the UN to take all the measures of redeployment, and things were going in the right way. Our brothers on the other side, the pro-Saudis militias, thought that Stockholm Agreement is surrendering agreement. We will give them everything. They get in Hodeidah, they go to the ports, they control everything, and then they make that blockade more tighter on us. This is a wrong explanation of the Stockholm Agreement. The Stockholm Agreement is part of building confidence, not increasing blockade and siege on us. So the issue of who will run the port is the one that stopped in the middle. We would like the people who used to be at the seaport to continue their work. No, they want their people to come and control the seaports. That's the main issue about this subject. So we are complying with the Stockholm Agreement, and we would like to reach that stage of going to peace.
Okay, and the US Secretary of State again saying that it's not your decision that is being made here. The decision is being made for you by the Iranians. They're saying you're not complying by the Stockholm Agreement because Iran is directing you to not play ball and to not seek peace.
That's Pompeo. That's the Secretary of State of the US explanation or words. We are not getting any instructions from Iran. Let them get Iran out of the Yemeni case. If the Americans want really to tighten the grip on Iran, they can do it at the Strait of Hormuz, not here. in our country. So again, we have our own national decision, and I can confirm it to you. If we have good relationship with Iran, what's the problem? Like if we have good relationship with Turkey. So again, these guys, the Americans, the American administrations, is using Yemen as a bait for Iran. So again, get the Iranians out of our affairs, deal with us as Yemenis, we will solve the problem. But to get Iran through Yemen, this is a useless case for the Trump administration. And we could tell them from now, they will lose the election because they have this dream, bad dream of Iran. And also they have a bad dream about Turkey soon in the future.
Okay, well, we'll address that at another time. I want to ask you about the death toll because one of the most recent estimates from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, or ACLED, is that 70,000 people have died in this conflict. It's a disaster. It's horrible. Tens of thousands of people have died. Yes, a lot of them have died at the hands of those Saudi coalition-led airstrikes. The UN is estimating that by the end of the year, the death toll could hit almost 250,000 people. And that 2 years after that, it could even hit 500,000 people. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people dying. We're talking about it maybe even superseding the Syrian death toll. Is it still worth fighting the way you're fighting if so many of your countrymen are going to die as a result of it?
No. This is not the case. The UN issued certain statements, and one of these statements estimated about 250,000 people have been killed. I can tell you that our estimates go to the range of 100,000 persons who died either due to the bombing of the Saudis, of our villages, our towns, and every place in this country is a target for them, or due to the hunger, due to the siege implemented on us. We are here living in our areas, unoccupied areas, for 4 years with a blockade. We don't get medications except from the UN. We don't get our necessities. We are under siege. So again, that number can increase due to the Saudis and their coalition.
A certain amount through your artillery and through your mines as well.
Of course, it happens during the wars. I mean, who can say that I shoot and there are no casualties? But if you compare us to them, if we run to 5 or 10 casualties, they are using huge bombs that can take streets. They are using their weapons imported from the US and imported from England and other European countries to test it in Yemen. They have no place to test the new weapons except in Yemen. So about 95% of the killing, we blame the Saudis and their coalition, and we will take them to international courts in the future when we come to some kind of arrangement for peace. We will not leave these kind of claims against them, and they will see it in the future. They have done a lot of war crimes. If we had some casualties because of the non-precision of, let's say, shooting some rockets, they are using heavy bombs. They're using bombs that you haven't seen.
So that's why I ask you.
The Yemeni
that's why
war.
I ask
so
you.
Again,
why don't you compromise so that the heavy bombing will stop, so that these hundreds of thousands of innocent people won't die?
We tried. We talked to the Saudis through other channels. We talked to the Emiratis. We talked to everyone. We want to stop the war. We want to sit on the table. The Saudis and the Emiratis want to distance themselves from this war. They say, no, it's not our war. It's your war with the Hadi government. No, it is their war. They are using their planes, their weapons, their money and everything, and they use our brothers in the south, I mean Hadi and his people, and some of the people who left Sana'a and left the unoccupied areas, they are using them, paying them, giving them salaries and giving them gifts to fight us so the war can continue and the American test on weapons can continue, the American administration, and all these kind of things happen at the end to get money for the American weapons or military industry. The story is big. And also for Iran. They want to upset Iran. They do everything in Yemen. If they are brave, they have to go to Iran. not to come to us. Even the Gulf countries, if they are brave really and they have that weapon to test it there, and you will see what the Iranians will show you.
Okay. Hisham Sharaf Abdullah, it's been great talking to you. I thank you for joining us once again on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Do remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Donald Trump gives Democrats a whole new reason to want to impeach him. But will they try? Until then, thank you for watching.